Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Sonic Talk special. We're here talking with Georgie Ward, who's there in London. The reason Georgie is here is because a good friend of both of ours, Will Gregory, pointed me at a brilliant performance video they did at St George's Hall, which was kind of based around the piano, but also had an enormous amount of technology and whatnot. And I was really struck by just how intensely, it seemed so intensely put together and rehearsed and just sort of fantastically accomplished. And I just thought, well, we need to speak to you. So here we are. How are you? How are you finding lockdown and all of these things?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm in London, so Christmas is officially cancelled for me. My parents are in Bristol. So yeah, it's lovely to be able to speak to you today because I don't have anything else to do.
Yeah, it's that funny period between Christmas and New Year that's been exacerbated. Well, not even that at Christmas yet, but yeah, we can't do anything at the moment. So may as well do an interview, eh? So Georgie, Tell me, just explain. I have a couple of clips. I mean, the first clip was basically the piano part. So there's three movements or three songs here, and this is in St George's Hall on a lovely Steinway EP 1.1. I won't play the whole thing. I'll put some other clips. But so tell me, how did this happen? I mean, what was the kind of, because I've been looking for your sort of online persona, or there's very little about you. You don't have as much kind of, or at least not for old boys like me who are looking for web pages and biogs and stuff. So tell me, how did this all happen?
Yeah, I don't have a website. It's probably something I should do, but yeah, I haven't really got around to doing that yet. So basically, over the summer, St George's was shut, so they couldn't put on any concerts. And they were offering the venue to local artists for recordings or like live stream performances and things like that. So I got in touch with the team there and said, oh, I'd love to do something. At this point, I didn't really know what I had in mind, but I just thought, oh my gosh, I need to make the most of this amazing opportunity. So yeah, I got in touch with Trish and Suzanne there and booked in a day. And then I had to think about what I was going to do. And I had already released a couple of piano pieces. So I definitely had that in mind, but I really wanted to incorporate the synth. So I'm beginning to work towards a solo set for piano and synth. So really kind of wanted to just give people an idea as to what they might experience if they were to come along to a full show. The electronic stuff was sort of the stuff that took the most time to sort. But yeah, to use that Model D piano there was just amazing. It's such a lovely piano and such a lovely hall.
I mean, St George's, for those that I'm in it because I've got a friend Gaz who lives in Bristol, and he's, St George's is quite legendary. We filmed a piece, I've forgotten now, with the music from the guy who did the Captain Scarlet stuff, and it was with Adrian Utley, and it sounded amazing. The acoustics in the space, it's quite legendary. But that piano, I must admit, I mean, it almost sounded like a sample library. It was so beautifully set up and in tune to me. I mean, I don't have those sort of ears that can tell, but it's quite a special piece of equipment, right?
Yeah, it was so lovely to play. But I mean, the sound engineer on the day, Ben Capp, who is a good friend of mine, he really is the one who made it sound amazing. I think he had like 9 or 10 mics on the piano. So yeah, and then we had a room mic as well, but obviously we didn't need too much reverb because it was an empty space with no people in it. So there was a lot of just natural reverb there. But yeah, I really have him to thank for how it sounds because he did a really good job, really, really good job.
So you rock up, you set up. I mean, a day is, that's going to be a long day, I'd imagine. And the way that you then performed, I mean, the piano pieces, I mean, because I get the sense that the piano and the keyboard is your primary instrument, and perhaps are you classically trained? I mean, how...
Yeah, so definitely piano is my sort of main instrument, and I have played a lot of sort of contemporary classical music, and I initially studied through Suzuki piano method. So from an early age, I went through this Japanese method called Suzuki. I don't know if you've
Is that the one where they kind of play you stuff while you're asleep? And
yeah, so it focuses on kind of listening and really developing the ear before sort of reading music. But I had a lovely teacher in Bristol who actually I'm still in touch with all the time. And so she kind of started me off. But yeah, definitely my roots are in classical music. But yeah, I mean, synthesis is kind of slightly newer in my career, but it's opened up a whole new world.
So one thing that's quite interesting about classically trained people is, generally speaking, it's quite a hard transition from the rigid kind of framework of contemporary classical music or classical music in its because it's, you know, it's written, it's kind of expressed in a very formal way. So, I mean, that transition then, because I noticed you do quite a lot of improvisation as well. I mean, have you found that quite easy? Because I'm guessing maybe the Suzuki method helps with that, because more regular, you know, sort of, I'm imagining the teacher with the ruler on the back of the fingers playing the keyboard, you know, the old-fashioned way, whereas Suzuki's a bit more of a kind of, well, it's not massively new, but what, 60s was it that it was first?
Yeah, rough around then. Yeah, it is a relatively new method, but yeah, I mean, I suppose I was always slightly rebellious in the Suzuki sense, because it's very, very classical, really. And I think as a teenager, I begun to be more interested in jazz and other styles. So I would often like play a Suzuki piece and then play it again, but do my own version of it. And that's probably how I then went into writing my own stuff and improvising a little bit more. But it was a great grounding. But I probably was a little bit rebellious.
Rebel teenager. It's interesting. There was a comment in one of the on your performance, which I'm just trying to find it now, that basically said, I guess it was a friend of yours that said, "Oh, it's so lovely to see you playing the piano that you used to perform on at concerts." So I'm guessing that must mean you performed in concerts as a child or a teen.
So that was why St George's is just like so close to me, really, because I grew up in Bristol. And we used to have like Suzuki concerts there every Easter. So from quite a young age, I used to go up and perform on that amazing piano, you know, at that point I would have had like a footstool because my feet wouldn't have reached the floor. But yeah, I mean, that's the other thing about Suzuki method is they really encourage performing from a young age. So even if it's just like Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star in one hand, you're up there and you are performing and you're bowing and introducing your pieces. So it's a very good training from the performance aspect as well.
Wow. Okay. So how did the music technology and the synths kind of come about then? Was that something that was introduced for a later stage of education, or was that just your general interest?
It's all Will's fault.
I see.
Yeah, basically when Will was the one who introduced me to synths, I really was pretty clueless before that. So I'd heard about synthesizers and things, but never really played them. And then Will called me up and asked me to sort of audition for the Moogs, and I turned up and. We were just going to play sort of one page of the Bach Brandenburg number 3, which we do with the Moogs, and I was playing this thing here, the SH09.
I recognise it because it's got the broken pitch wheel. I knew I'd seen it before.
Yeah, so this is his synth actually. He's really kindly let me sort of loan it on a long term. But yeah, I turned up and was introduced to this, and of course from a piano point of view, it's firstly tiny. The keys aren't weighted, but so I couldn't really play at all. I think we got to the end of the first line, and I had to stop because I couldn't change octave. I literally did not know how to use this synth. So that was my first introduction, and
Wow.
since then,
Things,
I've grown
things
really
have got out
fond.
of hand pretty fast by the looks of things, right?
Yeah, I know. It's a dangerous thing to get into, isn't it? But yeah, I'm just really fond of the SH09 now because it was my first sort of synth. And I think it was a really good introduction to synthesis because it kind of behaves itself. It's pretty stable. And it kind of does what it should on the front panel. It doesn't do anything too
what lines
crazy.
were you given in the Brandenburg then? Were you given the
So
tops?
I was doing viola.
Ah, okay. I mean, one thing that's really interesting, and this may have struck you as well, is because synthesizers, when you hear them in isolation, a raw tone is quite unexpressive and not particularly inspiring compared to the complexity of a piano voice and a piano sound because of all of the dynamics and stuff. I mean, how did you find that adapting? Because that's the one thing. I mean, we've done a piece with Will on the Moog Ensemble, and I've seen them several times. I don't think I've seen them while you've been playing. But the timbrality and the dynamics that they managed to get out of these effectively sort of one or non-velocity sensitive instruments is amazing. So you must have had to learn all of that too.
Yeah, so that was kind of initially the real challenge because I very quickly realised that no matter how I played with my fingers, the sound was just staying the same, regardless of the touch. So yeah, I mean, in the Moogs, you'll notice that, I mean, because they're monosynths, we often just play with one hand and our, other hand is permanently attached to a filter or something. So we've got, some sort of expression there. Volume pedals and foot pedals as well are used. But so throughout throughout sort of learning how to play this synth, I just like marked up all of my, so initially the Brandenburg, just made sure that all of the dynamics were written in and just
so it's just a question of figuring out, translating what that means in terms of a hand movement on the synth, right?
Yeah, exactly. And especially like octaves, so changing octaves a lot, that was probably one of the main challenges. But yeah, so I just use the cutoff here as my main source of expression, but then there's also modulation comes into that as well. But others in the ensemble use the EWI. So I think Will uses one of those as well. Yeah, so that allows for a bit more sort of natural expression.
So you started with a classic synth, SH09, great sounding instrument, masses of low end, and I'm guessing. I mean, the piano obviously has a full range, but it doesn't give you quite the same oof as electronic instruments. What was it about the electronic stuff that kind of got you? Was it the power of the low end, or was it just the timbral express? What was it that kind of maybe sort of first got you into it?
Well, I've always really enjoyed listening to electronic music, so I suppose it kind of just opened up a whole different sound world. And yeah, the SH09 has an awesome low end, but also quite a nice warm sort of mid-range to it as well. I mean, I think for me, things really begun to get fun when I bought my first poly synth.
Yeah.
That was
it's a Prophet 6, right?
Yeah, so this is my Prophet 6, and I was quite lucky. I was able to try quite a few of the Dave Smith instruments because quite a few of the Moog team have them. So I tried a Rev 2. I tried a Prophet 6 and an Obi, I think, as well.
Oh,
so
interesting.
Yeah, I fell in love with the Prophet 6 quite quickly, and that really opened up a kind of new world, especially as it's just way more practical because you can obviously write your sounds, so you can save sounds and things. So it's a bit more practical than.
Well, you've got more expression in it as well,
modern
because
stuff.
obviously you've got aftertouch. I mean, this is another thing. I mean, the aftertouch as a concept to a pianist is kind of a bit weird, I suppose,
Yeah.
because it's just not something that's part of your muscle memory either, right? Do you find that you're
No.
using that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm still playing as I would sort of on a piano, even if it's not changing the sound. But yeah, the aftertouch I do use quite a lot. I mean, I'm a bit careful with the aftertouch because it can go too far
Yeah.
in one direction. But yeah, you have a bit more sort of control on this one. But still, there's unweighted keys and
Yeah.
doesn't really feel like a piano. But yeah.
Well, okay, let's rewind a little bit. So, you were performing as a child in the kind of Suzuki school method. Then what's the transition between that and you performing with other musicians and the improvisation and the jazz stuff? Was there an education aspect to that, or was it just purely through networks of friends and associates? And
So a bit of both. I went to, in my sort of late teens, I went to Junior Trinity College of Music. So they have this Saturday school for kids under 18, and you can go to there's Trinity College in London.
Yeah.
It's based at the old Naval School, and that was a really amazing experience for me. I only managed to spend about 2 years there because I kind of went quite late in my teens, but yeah, it's, a wonderful building, and you just have hallways full of practice rooms with Steinway pianos in, and just all these facilities. So it was really amazing to have that as a teenager. And so I'd go up every Saturday, and you'd have lots of different sort of classes like musicianship and things like that, but mainly I focused on piano, and I also did a little bit of jazz there. So that kind of inspired me to do a little bit more within jazz. But then after that, I went to the University of Bristol to study music.
right.
And that I kind of dived into sort of French contemporary music a lot when I was there. Didn't do so much jazz, really just focused on hardcore modern music.
Right. Hardcore. But I imagine, the thing about going to any one of these places where there's a whole, it reminds me, it's like Fame in the 70s where there are all these kids who are just kind of like, hey, let's form a band, let's do a gig. There must be a lot, and exercising those muscles, I think, must be very rewarding, because normally for the rest of us who aren't involved in musical education, getting all of that together is just so cumbersome and difficult. So, just having it on tap.
Oh, yeah, no, it's amazing. And actually, as a pianist, especially at the University of Bristol, you're you manage to be involved in quite a few things because, well, I suppose you're always needed, aren't you? But I did quite a lot of accompanying there. So I accompanied like loads of different instrumentalists, worked with composers a lot. So I really enjoyed working with like other composers and playing new pieces by composers at the department. So that was really good fun. And yeah, I had a wonderful teacher there called Ray Clark, and he introduced me to loads of music. But yeah, it's nice because especially as a pianist, often you are isolated a bit. You don't, I did play in the orchestras a couple of times, but it's not really a sort of standard orchestral instrument.
No,
so,
it's usually that you'd be the soloist generally in that kind of scenario, wouldn't you?
Yeah. So yeah, it was lovely to be around other musicians and feel sort of part of something instead of just on your own all the time.
So, I'm guessing now at the moment, and this is one thing that maybe the St. George's opportunity arose, gigs and doing that is non-existent for many people. So, how are you keeping yourself kind of going and, creativity? Are you finding it tough, or are you actually finding it, because some people are finding it hard, some people are finding it easier depending on, which way it's going for them?
Yeah. So I've been quite lucky. Obviously back in March, everything was cancelled. I had a full sort of diary really, and everything was wiped, but that was the case for other musicians as well, of course. I also teach piano. I have 20 students, so that kept going, which was really nice, obviously over Zoom, but all of my students are lovely and they managed to adapt really quickly, and I actually found teaching piano over Zoom, well, it still is working quite well. But yeah, then in the latter half of the year, I've actually had quite a few things come through, but it did initially open up a lot more time just to write music. So that's, I wrote a solo piece for synth called Move Out, which was released sort of early summer. And then I wrote, I think it was like Piano Day. There's a Piano Day in, I think it was March. So in the first few weeks of lockdown, I wrote a piece for Piano Day. Right. And then actually recently I've been quite lucky. I've been doing a lot more sort of session work. So this previous lockdown, I was working throughout that.
Oh, is that remote? So you're kind of putting parts down and sending them back, or how is that working?
So no, it wasn't remote actually. It was based sort of around London in a few studios. So various bits of like promo and recordings and things. But yeah, it managed to continue really throughout lockdown, all in a sort of socially distanced environment. But yeah.
Well, I noticed on your CV that you've toured quite extensively and done sessions with Kylie. So tell me that, because we have a connection, because I actually remixed Kylie back years and many, many, many years ago. So there's a thread. And then I know that Will and Alison co-wrote a song with Kylie during the Goldfrapp years, which I was desperate to get along to the session because we'd never met. And she rang me up years and years ago to thank me for the remix, which was obviously a manager just saying, yeah, it's Nick. Hi, Nick. Thank you for the remix. So what did you do with her then? Was that a studio or a live thing?
Unfortunately, yeah. Well, it was a studio. So that was actually quite recently. Unfortunately, I didn't actually meet her. We were recording at one of the Moloko studios up in North London. Yeah. Assault and Battery. So so it was just the band. But I think it's going to be released soon. I'm not quite sure what's happening, but yeah, it was a great
piano?
track. And
was that piano you were playing?
So yeah, it was I did a piano part and synth part as well, just on the Prophet 6 actually. So yeah, I did the piano stuff first and then some crazy synth stuff.
Excellent. Well, that sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was really good fun. Really, really good fun.
So coming back to this whole St. George's gig, I mean, let me play a little bit of the third piece, which is Move Out, which has more, because the first two are quite piano heavy. Actually, I was going to ask the first piece, which was EP 1.1, very imaginative.
Yeah, I'm not great with names.
But it really reminded me of like Systems kind of stuff, like Steve Reich and that kind of counter rhythms. Was that the inspiration for that? Just an aside.
Yeah, so I really enjoy Steve Reich. I've played quite a few pieces of Steve Reich's and just really enjoy the sort of repetitive nature, but also because he was a percussionist as well, and I used to play drums. So everything for me comes from a sort of percussive point of view. So I really wanted that to come across in that first piece. So there's lots of like repeated notes, very much treating the piano as it is, as a percussive instrument. So but I really enjoy the Steve Reich stuff. So that definitely probably.
I did notice you have quite a forceful technique, or at least on those pieces, on that piece and the second piece, the third piece rather. The second piece is a bit more sort of old school piano composition, I suppose, if that's not too derivative.
No, not at all. when I first wrote my like piano EP, essentially, I just wanted to have a mix of kind of fast, short, percussive pieces, and then sort of softer, more intimate pieces. That all of these pieces have stemmed from an improvisation, and that's probably why I haven't written any of them down. But yeah, I just wanted that balance. I mean, all of them are quite short as well, because I have quite a short attention span, so I can't really write anything over 3 minutes. So I think the first one is only like 2 minutes. Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You say you don't write anything down. Is that because, I mean, do you find the writing process, if you have to annotate or notate it, is that difficult? Or, I mean, I imagine you must be kind of pretty fluent in it, or does it?
Well, I don't. Oh, I really do. I kind of just have a mental block with writing things down, and I think especially when I'm writing for piano and supposedly for myself to perform, I kind of feel like I don't need to. But then I do have to sometimes listen back and think, what was I doing there?
Well, as long as you record it. If you recorded it via MIDI, you could use a score editor to actually sort of get the rough stuff around, right?
Yeah, I could and probably should do that.
Yeah, there's a tip for you.
Yeah.
So I'm just let me play a little bit of the last movement, which is Move Out, which has more of the electronic, and then maybe we can talk a little bit how that was put together. I do recommend that everybody who's been watching this go and watch the whole thing, because it's really compelling. I mean, looking at your relaxed and smiling face now, you look like you were so in the zone and really focused. No, I won't tell anybody. Was that a one-take thing, or how many takes did that take?
So it's all live. We did everything that you see is one take. I did a few takes of each piece. Mainly, I had a couple of problems initially with my the trigger pad that I was using, so I had to stop and start Move Out a couple of times just because that wasn't coming through. But yeah, it was one take. I mean, there's multiple camera angles through there, but yeah, it was all one take.
And what are you using? Because obviously, not everything. Some of it is playback or at least sequenced or something. What do you use for the backing? I mean, because it sounded like that initial sequence was almost like a grunged up version of what was happening on the piano.
Yeah, exactly, and it was. So I had just a bit of track on Ableton. So I wrote the piece on Ableton. That was another thing. At the beginning of lockdown, I bought myself Ableton. I'd previously been using Logic, and so that was the first thing I wrote on Ableton. So that was just sort of the backing, because unfortunately I can't play every single part at the same time. But I try to do as much as I can.
Well, it's very, very tight. That first SH09 part is really, I mean, that's where I was thinking that feels like it's the Moog Ensemble chops kind of going on there, right?
Yeah, the Bach Brandenburg has helped with that. So I didn't have much sort of scope for expression like that, because I was actually using both hands at the same time. But yeah, the main challenge I think was just moving around the synths, like
the choreography.
I had to, the choreography of it, and changing sounds as well. So I was changing the sounds myself. So a lot of the time I had to play something and make sure I was moving on to the next sound. So I just had to be very, very organized about it. And that's probably why I have such an intense concentration face.
But it works really well, and I think that's the thing that's quite interesting about how, I mean, to the fact that you started this off, you learnt effectively Ableton at the beginning of the year, and then in October, when I guess this was ready, you off you went. I mean, that's quite an achievement. I mean, another thing I suppose is as a classical player or an improviser, I mean, how do you find having to deal with the grid? Do you find it really limiting, or have you found workarounds to kind of give it a bit of life and breath?
Yeah, it's really interesting because initially in Ableton you kind of want to sort of warp everything, so it's like metronomically in time, but actually it just makes it less human, really. So I've kind of embraced the sort of more human element, or trying to sort of make everything feel as if it's not just stuck on a grid. But I'm writing a piece at the moment actually where I'm trying to really make sure that it's not just, it's easy to kind of get in 4-bar sequences and repeat a little bit. So I'm just trying to move away from that. Move Out did have that kind of 4-bar repetitive nature to it, but I didn't mind that so much because I kind of wanted to write it as if it was a sort of pop song for a synth, essentially.
Do you find you get lost in sound design? Is that something that when you're making sounds for these, do you find that you have something in your head that you then try and make, or do you just flip a preset and then tweak it to sort of fit, musically what you're working on?
So the Prophet 6 has got quite a bright character to it. So it's great for creating kind of percussive sounds, and all of the sounds in Move Out, every single sound was written using these 3 synths. So even the drum sounds were mainly written on the Prophet 6
okay.
and the SH-09. So it's quite, it's just a really versatile synth for making these percussive, like noisy sounds. And then it's got quite a spiky bass sound. So that was really good fun, making like all the percussion.
Is that something that's important to you to know the provenance of the sounds that you make in a piece? I mean, is that part?
Yeah, I really like, I think I just really like the idea of basically doing all the sound design on the synth. So actually, once the sound's in Ableton, there was really not much that I did. I didn't use any MIDI instruments, and I didn't really have to put any effects on the sound because I had done that mainly from the synth. So trying to give it like that analog feel, I maybe slightly overloaded it. There were like 90 tracks. Which is probably...
So it was quite a complex session. It was a complex session then.
Yeah, it was quite complex. But the Prophet 6, for instance, has an inbuilt like effect thing. So you can add reverb and things on that, which helps with some of the percussive sounds. But then the MS-20, which I'm not hearing, but
I can hear that.
Just as you can hear that. Okay.
Yeah, I can hear that.
It's okay. I have no idea what sound is coming out of it. I can't actually hear it, but it's got a really epic bass sound. So most of the bass lines were written on the MS-20.
Interesting, and because the MS-20 filters are also very characterful, and you do the high. I know we got Will to come along to one of our sort of live events, and he brought the MS-20. It was sort of bring a synth and say why you love it, and he was just waxing lyrical because of the harmonics you can pluck out between those two filters. Is that the MS-20 Corg reissue? Is it? It's not an original.
Yeah, it's not the original.
I thought it looked in too good condition.
Yeah, unfortunately. But I bought it off a friend of mine, Drew Morgan, who also is in Bristol. He gave me that. So, it's probably quite good. You can't see my terrible patching from this angle. But, really nice big bass. And I've actually got it going through a sort of bass processor, which just gives it a bit more warmth. But
like a bass preamp?
Yeah, well, it's called a sonic exciter.
Okay. So that's a BBE or something, isn't it? Or
yeah, and it just adds a little bit more warmth sometimes to the low end, but that's only when I want that.
So, I mean, in terms of, because it sounds like you're quite late to the whole kind of technical aspects of music production. I mean, do you, because some people, I know I'm the same, when because I review gear for a living, and sometimes I find I'm sitting there and it's just like, just stop. I don't want it to get in the way. I just want to kind of get on with it. I mean, do you find that frustrating, or do you find it a kind of quite exciting and thrilling procedure and process?
Yeah, so I find it really exciting. I mean, it's taken me a while to sort of understand how everything works, but at the end of the day, I just, use my ear, and if I like the sound of something, that's what I use. How I've got there, I don't sometimes know. I don't really know much about like the physics behind the synth,
that's not important. That's why a synth has a user interface, isn't it? So that you can tweak the knobs and do that stuff. That's the whole point.
But yeah, it's just sort of opened up a whole different sort of world as well. And I mean, everything stems from a keyboard. So I'm not sure how I've never really tried, but I'm not sure how keen I'd be on like the modular synths and things, because for me it's still all about playing basically. But
give it time. It comes to everybody ultimately.
Yeah.
So what's next? So what's next for you then? I mean, because I mean, obviously it's hard to plan ahead, but I mean, the idea of doing these kind of bespoke pre-filmed things that you did it as a YouTube premiere. There are avenues and kind of ways through this as musicians, and it's a question of finding. Have you got a kind of plan? Have you got something you're working on? What's going to be next?
Yeah, so I mean, we'll have to see how everything pans out really, but my aim is to next year start performing sort of more of a full-length solo set for piano and synth. So I'm working towards doing that. I've actually got a solo synth set coming up in Bristol in early February. Whether it happens, fingers crossed. It was meant to be in November and it was cancelled, so it's been rescheduled for early Feb. That will just be solo synth. So I'm going to be writing some more stuff for that. And then hopefully maybe when we're able to perform more with a piano. But if not, I'm going to go down the route of maybe doing a live streamed concert.
Yeah.
Because
I think that's definitely a kind of a way to go, because I mean lots of people are finding it's just, I suppose the thing is, if you're in isolation and you're having to perform and think about the technical aspects, it can get a bit overloading. I mean, you've got a piano there. When you perform, is a piano always something that a physical piano something you always have to have? Are you a difficult artist that requires a highly tuned Steinway Model D at all your venues, or you just stomp off?
Oh my god, no! I will play anything. If there's a piano there, I will play it, whatever condition it is in. I mean, I'd love to perform with a piano. I'm aware that it does limit slightly kind of venue choices and things like that. So I think I need to be really practical and work on a set that just in case there's not a piano, because I would like to perform as much as possible and kind of get out there. So I'll have to work on a different version of a set. Maybe I have a CP88 piano, but I think right. I'm keen to sort of move away from the electric keyboard sound. So if I do incorporate more of a piano sound into my set, I'll kind of probably manipulate it slightly. So I'm not trying to just copy a piano sound.
Right. So you're preparing your own prepared pianos, I suppose. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's been absolutely lovely to talk to you. I was going to ask, where do people find out where to find your stuff? And because I know I struggled. So I know that we've got, you can be found on Spotify, right? So definitely on Spotify.
Yeah.
And also Instagram and...
yeah.
And SoundCloud as well, I noticed.
Yeah, I haven't looked at my SoundCloud for a bit, but... definitely. I mean, I'm not like the best at social media, but I have decided to focus on one thing, and that's Instagram. So I'm not great on Facebook. I don't do Twitter, but I am fairly regular on Instagram. So that's
so people could see you'll be promoting your upcoming events on that, right?
Yes, definitely.
So, Georgie, thank you so much for talking to us. I hope you have as good a Christmas as it's possible to have. But I mean, in your room, I guess you can write some music and just get lost in that for a while, right?
Yeah, one thing that music has taught me is I'm pretty good at isolation. And if I've got these guys around me, I'll be fine. It's going to be a great Christmas.